Montana morning broke cold and clear, frost painting the window panes in delicate patterns that reminded John Ghost Walker of
Are you here to
sniper
take
hide
me in?
locations he'd
I'm here
once
to help
mapped
you.
across Eastern Europe. He woke at precisely 500 hours, as he had every morning for the past 45 years, whether in jungle terrain, desert wastelands, or here in his modest ranch house overlooking the Bitterroot Mountains. At 62, Walker's body told the story of a warrior's life, a web of scars across his torso, the slight stiffness in his right knee from a Belgrade extraction gone wrong in '92, and hands that remained impossibly steady despite the arthritis that sometimes burned through his joints like distant artillery fire. His face, weathered by wind and sun from 1,000 observation posts, carried the quiet dignity of a man who had seen the darkest corners of human conflict and returned with his soul intact, if not unmarked. The dream had come again last night. Berlin, 1989. The wall still standing, though not for much longer. Operation Checkmate. His spotter, Jimmy Davis, bleeding out in his arms while the shadow known as the surgeon disappeared into the labyrinthine East Berlin streets. Alexander Volkov, KGB assassin, torture expert, ghost story told to terrify young CIA operatives. That night had been Walker's one failure, the one target he never eliminated, the one friend he couldn't save. Walker's morning routine never varied. 20 minutes of stretching to keep the old injuries from calcifying, 50 push-ups and 50 sit-ups, half his daily count from his active duty days, but respectable for a man whose contemporaries considered golf a strenuous activity. Coffee brewed military strong, black as tactical operations. And finally, the most sacred ritual, the cleaning of his M40 M1 sniper rifle. The weapon wasn't standard issue anymore. Hadn't been for decades. But this particular rifle had accompanied Walker through 3 continents and 14 major operations. He'd modified it himself, adjusting the trigger pull to 3.5 pounds, precisely matching the rifle to his own breathing pattern and shooting rhythm. Modern snipers would scoff at its weight and limited range compared to current technology, but Walker knew something they didn't. When electronics fail and batteries die, mechanical precision and human skill remain. The rifle lived in a custom-built display case in his office, surrounded by photographs of men most Americans would never know had existed. Force reconnaissance Marines with mud-streaked faces, SEAL team operators whose missions would remain classified for another 50 years, and one photo, separate from the others, Walker and Davis in Berlin, 24 hours before everything went wrong. He was midway through oiling the bolt action when the phone rang. Not his cell phone, few people had that number, but the landline he maintained for family and select former colleagues. The caller ID displayed a Virginia area code Walker recognized immediately. Fort Belvoir, Defense Intelligence Agency headquarters. Walker, he answered, voice still carrying the clip precision of military communications. Ghost. It's been a long time. Walker's hand stilled on the rifle. 15 years since he'd heard that voice. Frank Iron Harrison, his former commander, mentor, the man who'd pulled him from that East Berlin alley with Davis's blood still soaking his uniform. Iron, figured you'd be fly fishing in Colorado by now. That was the plan. Harrison's voice sounded older than Walker remembered, but the steel underneath remained. Unfortunately, the past has a way of refusing to stay buried. Walker's focus sharpened, the world narrowing to the sound of Harrison's breathing through the receiver. Which part of the past are we talking about? Berlin, 1989. A pause heavy with unspoken meaning. The surgeon is back, Ghost. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Walker's gaze shifted to the rifle on his table. Volkov is dead. Heart attack in Moscow, 2009. That's what we wanted everyone to believe. Turns out reports of his death were politically expedient fiction. Walker absorbed this, measuring implications with the same precision he once used to calculate windage at 800 meters. Why now? Why me? I've been out for 15 years. Because three former intelligence officers are dead, each one connected to Operation Checkmate, each killed with surgical precision, a single shot from distances exceeding 1,000 meters. The kind of shots only a handful of people in the world could make. Harrison paused. The kind of shots you could make, Ghost? You think Volkov is settling old scores. I know he is, and you're almost certainly on his list. Harrison's tone shifted. The command voice Walker remembered from countless mission briefings. We need you at Fort Bragg. There's a transport waiting at Missoula International. Wheels up in 3 hours. Walker glanced around his quiet home, at the life he'd built after hanging up his scope, the peaceful anonymity he'd cultivated like a garden. Then his eyes settled on the photo of Jimmy Davis. I'll be there. Fort Bragg sprawled across the North Carolina landscape like a small city dedicated to the art of warfare. Walker noted the changes since his last visit. New buildings, enhanced security protocols, younger faces. But the essence remained unchanged. This was where America forged its sharpest weapons, its human instruments of national policy. Harrison met him on the tarmac, the years evident in his stooped shoulders and thinning white hair. At 70, the former Special Forces commander had outlived most of his contemporaries, though the price was etched in the deep lines around his eyes. They embraced briefly, the wordless acknowledgement between warriors who had seen both victory and loss. Good to see you still standing, Iron. Harrison offered a thin smile. Mostly standing. 2 hip replacements and a pacemaker. But they can't kill me until I sign the retirement paperwork. He gestured toward a waiting vehicle. Let's talk inside. SIF's been cleared for our meeting. The sensitive, compartmented information facility represented the heart of modern military intelligence, a room designed to prevent any electronic surveillance, where America's most closely guarded secrets could be discussed openly. As they entered, Walker noted 3 other people waiting, a woman in her early 40s with the alert posture of intelligence personnel, a younger man wearing the rank of Marine captain, and an older officer with a full colonel's eagles, regarding Walker with barely concealed skepticism. Harrison made the introductions. Sarah Mitchell, DIA Counterintelligence, one of our best analysts. Captain Michael Reynolds, top graduate from the Scout Sniper Instructor School at Quantico, and Colonel James Peterson, Joint Special Operations Command Liaison. Walker shook hands with Mitchell and Reynolds, noting the captain's grip. Too tight, trying to make an impression. Peterson merely nodded, his displeasure evident. With respect, Frank, Peterson said, bringing a retired operative into an active counterintelligence operation violates half a dozen protocols. Walker's been out of the game for 15 years. Some skills don't deteriorate, Colonel, Harrison replied evenly, activating the room's display screen, especially when you're one of only 3 Americans to ever complete a confirmed kill at over 2,000 meters. The screen filled with photographs, 3 men, each in military or intelligence service uniforms, each now displayed with post-mortem images that Walker absorbed with professional detachment. Thomas Keller, CIA operations officer, killed 9 weeks ago outside his Arlington home, shot from an estimated 1,250 meters. William Spencer, retired naval intelligence, killed 6 weeks ago in Charleston. Range approximately 100 meters. And 3 days ago, General Robert Haywood, former DIA director, shot through his office window at the Pentagon from a calculated distance of 1,880 meters. Harrison turned to face them. All 3 men served in Berlin during the final years of the Cold War. All 3 had knowledge of Operation Checkmate. Walker studied the ballistic reports. Subsonic 7.62 millimeter rounds, custom loads, minimal powder signature, Russian manufactured, but not standard Spetsnaz issue. Mitchell looked up, surprised. How could you know that from just the photos? Entry wound characteristics, Walker replied. I've seen Volkov's work before. Harrison nodded. Alexander Volkov was KGB's finest wet work specialist. After the Soviet collapse, he allegedly went private sector, selling his services to the highest bidder. In reality, he remained an FSB asset, running deep cover operations against former Soviet states and occasionally Western targets. If he's targeting checkmate personnel, Walker said, then he's working his way through a very specific list. A list that almost certainly includes you, Harrison confirmed. And me. Captain Reynolds leaned forward. I've studied every major sniper operation of the last 50 years, sir. I've never heard of Operation Checkmate. Because it doesn't officially exist, Harrison replied. In late 1989, as the Berlin Wall was coming down, we received intelligence that the KGB was exfiltrating a high-value scientist with complete knowledge of the Soviet biological weapons program. The scientist was scheduled for transfer to Moscow, where his expertise would have advanced their weapons capabilities by decades. Walker picked up the narrative. A joint CIA Special Forces team was tasked with intercepting the transfer and extracting the scientist. I was the primary sniper, positioned to eliminate security forces and create an extraction corridor. What went wrong? Mitchell asked. Walker's expression hardened. Everything. We walked into a trap. Volkov had compromised our operational security somehow. My spotter was killed. The scientist died in the crossfire. 3 team members captured and later executed. And Volkov escaped, Harrison finished, after which he became something of an obsession for certain intelligence circles. The one who got away. The perfect Soviet operative. Colonel Peterson cleared his throat. This is ancient history. Our focus should be protecting potential targets with current security protocols, not dragging retirees back into service for some misguided revenge operation. Harrison's gaze turned flinty. Which is why you're not in charge of this operation, Colonel? I am. He turned to Walker. We need your expertise, Ghost, not just to catch Volkov, but to train a new generation in the techniques needed to counter someone with his skill set. The best of our current snipers train on computerized systems, Reynolds said, skepticism evident in his tone. Ballistic computers, range-finding technology. The battlefield has evolved, sir. Walker met the younger man's gaze. And when your battery dies in the field, when a GPS jammer blocks your signal, when your multi-million-dollar targeting system fogs over in the rain? What then, Captain? Reynolds had no immediate answer. Tomorrow morning, Harrison continued, you'll begin working with Captain Reynolds and his top snipers at Quantico. Teach them everything, not just shooting techniques, but how operatives like Volkov think, how they plan, how they execute. Meanwhile, Agent Mitchell will coordinate intelligence efforts to locate Volkov before he strikes again. Walker nodded, though his attention had shifted to the photographs on the screen. Something about the kill pattern nagged at his tactical instincts. These shots, they're good, very good, but they're also performative. Mitchell tilted her head. What do you mean? Volkov could have made these kills more easily from closer ranges. He's showing off, sending a message. Walker pointed to the trajectory analyses. He wants us to know exactly who's doing this. He's calling you out, Harrison said quietly. Yes. Walker stood, his decision made. I'll work with your team, Iron, but understand this. Volkov isn't just settling old scores. He's executing a broader operation. These killings are just the opening moves. Colonel Peterson scoffed. Based on what evidence? Walker turned, fixing the colonel with a 1,000-yard stare that had earned him his nickname. Based on knowing my enemy, Colonel, something they apparently don't teach at the War College anymore. Marine Corps-based Quantico sprawled across Virginia's countryside like a fortress of modern warfare expertise. Home to the FBI Academy, the Marine Corps Sniper School, and numerous special operations training facilities, It represented America's commitment to maintaining the world's most lethal fighting force. As dawn broke over the sniper training range, Walker watched Captain Reynolds and his team of 8 elite marksmen prepare their equipment. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. Walker in faded jeans and a simple tactical shirt, carrying his weathered M40A1. The young snipers with their modular combat systems, digital camouflage, and state-of-the-art rifles fitted with computerized scopes and rangefinders. "Gentlemen," Walker began, his voice carrying across the morning air without being raised, "you've been selected because you represent the best technical shooters in today's armed forces. Your instructors tell me you can reliably hit targets at 800 meters using your current equipment." Reynolds nodded confidently. "My personal best is 1,100 meters with the new M110 SAS system." Walker acknowledged this with a slight nod. "Impressive. Today we're going to set aside technology and focus on fundamentals, because the man you're training to face doesn't rely on laser rangefinders or ballistic computers. He kills using skills developed through decades of practical application." He could see the skepticism in their faces, the indulgent smiles exchanged between the younger snipers, the silent communication that said, "The old man is living in the past." "Captain Reynolds," Walker continued, "please select your best rifle and take a position on the firing line. Target will be the silhouette at position 3. Reynolds confidently assembled his system, a cutting-edge sniper platform with thermal imaging, wind calculation software, and GPS-assisted targeting. Walker watched patiently as the captain established his firing position and began inputting data into his scope's computer system. "Range to target?" Walker asked. 200 meters, Reynolds replied without looking up from his equipment. "Wind approximately 8 miles per hour from the northwest. Humidity 62%. Barometric pressure 12 inches. System is calculating ballistic solution now." Walker nodded, surveying the same target with nothing but his naked eye and decades of experience. "When you're ready, Captain, take your shot." Reynolds settled behind his rifle, his breathing controlled and steady. Perfect technique is taught in modern sniper schools. He waited for his targeting system to provide the final adjustments, then squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked across the range. Through his binoculars, Walker observed the impact, 6 inches right of center mass. "Slight windage error," Reynolds muttered, adjusting his scope. "System must need recalibration." Walker set down his binoculars and picked up his old M40A1. Without using any electronic assistance, he quickly established a prone firing position, made several mental calculations, and adjusted his scope manually. "What's your Kentucky windage for this shot, Ghost?" Harrison asked from behind them. "Approximately 14 minutes right, 6 minutes elevation," Walker replied without hesitation. "Wind's actually gusting to 10 miles per hour in this valley. The trees on the right ridge create a ventry effect." Reynolds looked up from his scope, clearly skeptical. "That's impossible to calculate without instruments." Walker didn't respond. He simply controlled his breathing, found the space between heartbeats, and squeezed the trigger with the smooth pressure developed through thousands of repetitions. The crack of the rifle echoed across the range. Through his scope, Walker watched as the bullet struck dead center of the target's head. "How?" Reynolds began, then fell silent as he verified the hit through his own scope. "Instruments fail," Walker said quietly, already preparing for a second demonstration shot. "Technology can be jammed, batteries die, electronics short out. But skills acquired through experience never disappear." Before Reynolds could respond, the range safety officer's radio crackled to life. "All personnel, we have a security breach at the eastern perimeter. Unknown number of armed intruders. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Walker's reaction was immediate, his body responding with the muscle memory of countless combat situations. Everyone down. Seek cover and prepare defensive positions. As the snipers scrambled to secure their equipment and establish firing positions, Walker caught Harrison's eye across the range. No words were needed. Both men understood immediately Volkov had found them. The attack came with professional precision, simultaneous breaches at 3 points along Quantico's eastern perimeter, tactical teams moving with a disciplined efficiency that spoke of special forces training. From his elevated position at the sniper range, Walker observed the coordinated assault through his rifle scope, recognizing the Russian Zaslon tactics instantly. FSB Alpha Group methodology, he muttered to Harrison, who had taken cover beside him. This isn't some random terrorist attack. This is Volkov's personal signature. Harrison nodded grimly, his old instincts clearly still sharp. He's sending a message, coming right into one of our most secure facilities. Walker quickly assessed their tactical situation. The sniper range offered excellent fields of fire, but limited cover. Base security would respond within minutes, but until then, they were on their own. 8 trainee snipers, Harrison and himself against what appeared to be at least 15 specialized operatives. Reynolds, Walker called out, position your men at 30-degree intervals covering the eastern approach. Conserve ammunition and wait for confirmed hostile targets. The young captain hesitated momentarily, clearly unaccustomed to taking orders from a civilian, but the unmistakable authority in Walker's voice cut through his uncertainty. Reynolds quickly deployed his snipers in a defensive semicircle, their rifles trained on the tree line where the intruders would emerge. Walker noted with professional approval how Reynolds set up interlocking fields of fire. Perhaps the captain's training wasn't entirely dependent on technology after all. The first attackers appeared at the edge of the forest, moving in tactical formation, weapons at the ready. Walker identified Russian-made Val suppressed assault rifles, specialized equipment used by Spetsnaz and FSB operators. Confirmation, if he needed it, that this was Volkov's team. On my mark, Walker said calmly, settling behind his rifle. Targets at approximately 400 meters. I'll take point, man. Reynolds on the flanker to the right. Remaining shooters select individual targets. He controlled his breathing, finding that perfect space of clarity that had served him through decades of combat operations. 3, 2, 1, execute. 6 shots cracked across the range in near-perfect synchronicity. 5 attackers dropped immediately. The 6th, Reynolds' target, staggered but remained upright, returning fire as he sought cover. You hit him, but not center mass, Walker observed without criticism. Plate carrier absorbed most of the impact. Adjust aim to exposed areas, neck or pelvis. Reynolds' face tightened with concentration as he reacquired his target and fired again. This time, the hostile went down and stayed down. Multiple targets advancing from the northeast, one of the snipers called out. At least 8 more. Walker quickly reassessed. They were outnumbered with limited ammunition and cover. Base security would be engaged with the other breach points. Their position would soon be compromised. Reynolds, maintain overwatch here with 4 men. Harrison, you and I will take the remaining shooters and flank from the west ridge. We need to split their attention. As they began to move, a burst of automatic fire tore through their position. Reynolds cried out, clutching his leg as he fell behind the low concrete barrier that served as their main cover. Captain's hit! One of the snipers shouted. Without hesitation, Walker changed direction and moved toward Reynolds, staying low as bullets impacted around him. The captain's face had gone pale, blood seeping between his fingers where he clutched his thigh. Femoral arteries intact, Walker assessed quickly, pulling a tourniquet from his pocket, a piece of equipment he'd carried habitually for 40 years. You'll live, but you're out of this fight. Reynolds gritted his teeth against the pain. I can still shoot. Walker met his eyes, seeing beyond the young captain's bravado to the fear beneath. Not fear of dying, but of failing his men. Walker recognized it intimately. He'd seen it in Jimmy Davis's eyes in Berlin. Your men need leadership more than they need another rifle, Walker said quietly, applying the tourniquet with practiced efficiency. Direct their fire, coordinate their movements. That's how you serve now. Something changed in Reynolds' expression, a flicker of understanding, of respect. He nodded once, then turned to his team, issuing clear commands despite his injury. Walker rejoined Harrison, who had assembled 3 snipers for their flanking maneuver. Reynolds will hold here. We need to move quickly before they bring in heavier weapons. As they circled around through the woods bordering the range, Harrison kept pace surprisingly well for a man in his 70s. Just like Kandahar in '02, he commented with grim humor, though I was a bit more spry back then. We both were, Walker replied, scanning the tree line for threats. But some things improve with age. They established a new position on elevated ground, giving them clear sight lines to the attackers who were now concentrating fire on Reynolds' position. Walker counted 12 hostiles remaining, using tactical movement that confirmed his suspicions about their training level. These aren't ordinary contractors, he told Harrison. Former Spetsnaz, possibly Alpha Group. Volkov only works with the best. Like recognizes like, Harrison replied, a hint of pride in his voice. Walker lined up his first shot, leading a hostile who was moving to flank Reynolds' position. The familiar rhythm returned. Breathe, focus, squeeze. The hostile dropped silently, his companions unaware of the threat from their flank. For the next 10 minutes, Walker methodically eliminated the attacking force, each shot a demonstration of skills honed across decades of service. The 3 younger snipers watched with growing appreciation as he worked, occasionally taking shots of their own under his quiet guidance. When the last attacker fell, Walker maintained his vigilance, scanning methodically for any remaining threats. Only when base security forces finally arrived in force did he lower his rifle. Clear, he announced, the single word carrying the weight of professional certainty. As medical teams attended to Reynolds and the other wounded, Harrison stepped closer to Walker, his expression grave. This wasn't a serious attempt to kill us, Walker said before Harrison could speak. Not with Volkov's capabilities. This was reconnaissance by fire, testing our response, our capabilities. Harrison nodded slowly. Meaning he's planning something bigger. Yes, and he wanted me to know he's coming. Walker ejected the spent cartridge from his rifle, examining it briefly before discarding it. He's playing chess, not checkers. This was just a pawn sacrifice. In the aftermath of the attack, Quantico transformed into a hive of intelligence and counterintelligence activity. The FBI, Naval Criminal Investigative Service, and military intelligence all descended on the base, seeking answers about how a team of professional assassins had penetrated one of America's most secure military installations. Walker avoided the bureaucracy, instead focusing on what truly mattered, preparing Reynolds and his team for what would come next. The captain's wound had been serious, but not life-threatening. Within 24 hours, he was supervising his snipers from a wheelchair, his leg heavily bandaged, but his mind clear. You saved my life out there, Reynolds acknowledged when Walker visited him in the base medical facility. I would have bled out before the medics arrived. Walker shook his head slightly. You would have done the same. That's what we do. A silence fell between them, not uncomfortable, but weighed with unspoken understanding. Reynolds studied the older man with new eyes, seeing beyond the outdated equipment and unfashionable techniques to the core of experience beneath. I've spent 8 years mastering modern sniper systems, Reynolds said finally. Thermal imaging, ballistic computers, satellite weather data. I can input 20 variables into a firing solution. Walker waited, sensing more to come. But I missed that shot, and you didn't. Reynolds looked down at his bandaged leg. Maybe there's something to the old ways after all. Walker smiled slightly. It's not about old versus new, Captain. It's about understanding that technology is a tool, not a replacement for skill. Your generation has advantages we never dreamed of, but fundamentals remain fundamental. Reynolds nodded slowly. Will you teach me the things they don't put in the manuals? Before Walker could respond, the door opened, and Sarah Mitchell entered, carrying a thick file folder. Her expression was tight with controlled urgency. We've got something, she announced without preamble. Analysis of the attacker's equipment in communications. Walker gestured for her to continue. They were using modified Russian tactical gear, but with American power supplies and communication encryptions. And we found this. She produced a small metal object, a cufflink shaped like a chess piece. A knight. Walker's expression darkened as he took the object, turning it over in his scarred hands. Volkov's personal signature, he started using it in the late 80s. The knight, moving in unexpected patterns, coming at you sideways. There's more, Mitchell continued. We've been analyzing patterns in the three assassinations, looking for operational connections beyond the Berlin link. She spread photographs across Reynolds' bedside table. Each killing happened within 24 hours of a major military transport arriving at a nearby installation. Walker studied the timeline she'd constructed, his tactical mind immediately grasping the implications. He's not just killing for revenge. He's tracking something. Or someone, Mitchell confirmed. We think the primary target may be a person being moved through military channels, possibly a defector or high-value intelligence asset. Harrison entered the room, his face grim. Just got word from the Pentagon. Colonel Peterson is coordinating the transfer of a Russian scientist who defected 3 months ago. Dr. Anatoly Baranov, former head of Russia's Advanced Weapons Division. Walker's eyes narrowed. Where is Baranov now? Peterson has him at a safe house in Virginia. They're scheduled to move him to the Naval Research Lab in 2 days. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room as the implications became clear. Peterson wasn't on the checkmate team, Walker said finally, voicing what they were all thinking. Why is he handling a high-value Russian defector with Volkov in play? Mitchell's expression tightened. I did some digging into Peterson's service record. There's a gap between 1988 and 1990. His file says he was at language school in Monterey, but I can't find any supporting documentation. Berlin, Walker said quietly. He was in Berlin during checkmate. Harrison shook his head. That's impossible. I knew every American operative in that sector. Unless he wasn't on our side, Walker replied, the pieces falling into place with terrible clarity. Iron, we need to check every communication between Peterson and external channels since Volkov surfaced. Mitchell was already moving toward the door. I'll get a team on it immediately. And I need to speak with my snipers, Reynolds added, struggling to sit up straighter in his bed. If we're going up against Volkov, they need to understand what we're facing. Walker placed a hand on the younger man's shoulder, gently but firmly keeping him in place. Rest. Heal. I'll work with your team. He turned to Harrison. We need to assume Peterson has compromised whatever security protocols are in place for Baranov. If the pattern holds, Volkov will make his move within 48 hours. Harrison nodded, the old fire returning to his eyes. Just like the old days, Ghost, racing the clock against an invisible enemy. With one difference, Walker replied grimly. This time, we know exactly who we're hunting. The safe house was located in rural Virginia, approximately 40 miles west of Norfolk Naval Station. A former horse farm converted to a high-security facility with sightlines carefully maintained for defensive purposes. Perfect for protecting a high-value asset or for setting a trap. Walker, Harrison, and Mitchell established a command post in a hotel room 10 miles from the safe house, working through the night to develop a counter strategy. Reynolds joined them via secure video link from Quantico. His snipers gathered around him as Walker outlined Volkov's likely approach. He favors elevated positions with multiple escape routes, Walker explained, marking potential sniper hides on the satellite imagery displayed on their laptops. He'll conduct reconnaissance for at least 24 hours before the operation, establishing firing solutions for every possible scenario. How do we counter someone that methodical? One of Reynolds' snipers asked. By understanding his psychology, Walker replied. Volkov isn't just a shooter, he's a chess player. He thinks 5 moves ahead, anticipating your reactions, planning countermeasures for every contingency. So we need to make a move he won't expect, Reynolds suggested, catching on quickly. Exactly. Walker pointed to the satellite image. Based on the terrain and Volkov's known preferences, these 3 locations provide optimal firing positions covering the safe house and the road leading to Norfolk. Mitchell frowned at the screen. That gives him almost 2 miles of coverage. We can't secure that much territory with our limited personnel. We don't need to, Walker said, because we're not going to play defense. Harrison smiled slightly, recognizing his former protege's thinking. We're going to draw him out. Peterson doesn't know we've identified him as the leak, Walker continued. That gives us an advantage. We feed him false information about Baranov's transport schedule. Move it up by 24 hours. Peterson will relay that to Volkov, who will be forced to accelerate his timeline. Rushing a methodical operator like Volkov increases the likelihood of mistakes, Harrison added for the benefit of the younger snipers watching. Walker nodded. Meanwhile, we position our own shooters here and here. He marked 2 positions on the map, covering the most likely hide positions Volkov will use. And the bait? Mitchell asked quietly. Walker met her gaze steadily. Me. Volkov wants revenge for Berlin. We make sure he knows I'll be personally escorting Baranov to Norfolk. Reynolds leaned forward in his hospital bed. With respect, sir, that's suicide. Volkov won't miss a shot like that. He won't take that shot, Walker replied with absolute certainty. Not immediately. His ego won't allow it. He'll want me to know he's beaten me before he pulls the trigger. That's our window of opportunity. The room fell silent as they considered the plan. It was audacious, dangerous, and entirely dependent on Walker's psychological assessment of a man he hadn't seen in over 30 years. Finally, Harrison spoke. It could work, but we'll need to coordinate with local authorities without alerting Peterson. I have contacts at FBI who can help with that, Mitchell offered. Walker turned to the screen showing Reynolds and his team. Captain, I need your 2 best shooters ready to move at 0500 tomorrow. The rest will create a diversion at Quantico to maintain our cover story. Reynolds nodded, his expression revealing both concern and determination. They'll be ready. I wish I could join you. You will, Walker assured him. Just not how you're thinking. After the briefing concluded and the others departed to make preparations, Harrison lingered behind, studying his old friend with knowing eyes. You really think Volkov will hesitate? That doesn't match the profile of the man I remember. Walker sighed, allowing a rare glimpse of the weight he carried. The Volkov you remember was a KGB operative following orders. The man we're facing now has spent 3 decades nursing a personal vendetta. That changes the psychological equation. Harrison nodded slowly. And if you're wrong? Walker checked his rifle, his movements automatic after countless repetitions across a lifetime of service. Then you'll have to finish what I started in Berlin. That's not a satisfactory answer. Ghost. Walker looked up, meeting his old commander's gaze. It's the only answer there is, Iron. Some debts can only be paid one way. As morning approached, Walker stood at the hotel window, watching as the Virginia countryside emerged from darkness. Somewhere out there, Volkov was preparing too, cleaning his weapon, calculating trajectories, planning the death of the one man who had nearly stopped him all those years ago. I'm coming for you this time, Walker whispered to the dawn. No more ghosts. No more shadows. The morning of the operation arrived with a heavy fog blanketing the Virginia countryside, weather that would complicate visibility for most snipers, but created conditions Walker had operated in countless times before. As the tactical team made final preparations in their hotel room command post, Mitchell received an encrypted message from her FBI contacts. Peterson took the bait, she announced, looking up from her secure laptop. He's adjusted the transport schedule and informed his chain of command that Baranov will be moved this morning instead of tomorrow. Walker nodded, making a final adjustment to his rifle scope. And the real Baranov, secured at a Navy facility in Norfolk, Harrison confirmed. Peterson has no access. The package we're transporting will be an FBI agent of similar build. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Create the appearance of the original transport, with Walker prominently visible as security, while Reynolds' snipers maintained overwatch positions, covering Volkov's likely hide locations. Meanwhile, the real scientist would remain safely hidden until Volkov was neutralized. Remember, Walker addressed the two young snipers who had joined them from Quantico. Volkov isn't just a shooter. He's an operator who thinks in terms of complete battlefield awareness. He'll have contingency plans, possibly additional personnel. Maintain discipline and follow your training. The young men nodded, their expressions serious beneath the face paint applied for the operation. Walker had worked intensively with them over the past 24 hours, impressed by their adaptability and willingness to integrate his old-school methods with their modern training. One more thing, Walker added, his voice taking on the quiet authority that had guided special operations teams through 3 decades of missions. No matter what happens to me, your priority remains the same. Neutralize Volkov. No heroics, no deviations. Complete the mission. As they moved into position, Walker's mind remained calm, his focus absolute. The weight of the mission, stopping Volkov, avenging Jimmy Davis, protecting Baranov, all faded into background awareness, leaving only the crystal clarity of operational focus he had cultivated throughout his career. The convoy assembled exactly as planned. 2 armored SUVs with Walker and the FBI agent posing as Baranov in the second vehicle. Harrison and Mitchell coordinated from the command post, maintaining communication with Reynolds, who was directing his snipers from a secure video feed at Quantico. All elements in position, Harrison confirmed through Walker's earpiece. Operation is green. The convoy began moving along the predetermined route, a winding country road that would eventually connect with the highway to Norfolk. Walker sat beside the FBI agent, his rifle positioned for immediate use, his eyes constantly scanning the surrounding terrain through the bulletproof glass. Passing checkpoint 1, the lead vehicle reported. No signs of surveillance or hostile activity. Walker's instincts, honed through decades of high-risk operations, remained on high alert. Volkov would choose his moment carefully, likely at one of 3 locations Walker had identified as optimal ambush points. The first was a stretch of road bordered by elevated woodland, perfect for a long-range shot with multiple escape routes. As they approached this zone, Walker tensed slightly, his hand tightening almost imperceptibly on his rifle. Approaching first potential contact point, he murmured into his microphone. All elements maintain maximum vigilance. The convoy passed through the area without incident. Walker's tactical mind recalculated, considering alternatives. Volkov was too experienced to miss such an opportunity unless he had identified a better position. Moving to checkpoint 2, the lead driver reported. ETA 3 minutes. The second location was a bridge crossing a small river, a natural choke point that would force the convoy to slow down. As they approached, Walker's radio crackled to life. "Ghost, this is Overwatch 1, came the voice of one of Reynolds' snipers. Movement detected at bearing 045, approximately 1,200 meters from the bridge. Single individual with what appears to be a rifle case." Walker processed this information instantly. Maintain visual, but do not engage. Likely a spotter, not Volkov himself. Understood. Maintaining position. The convoy slowed as it approached the bridge, following standard security protocols for choke points. Walker's senses heightened, analyzing every detail of their surroundings. Something felt wrong. The positioning of the spotter, the obvious nature of the surveillance. It didn't match Volkov's methodical approach. Iron, Walker said quietly into his comm. I think we're looking at a diversion. Volkov wouldn't position a spotter where we could detect him so easily. Harrison's response was immediate. Concur. What's your assessment? Before Walker could answer, a deafening explosion rocked the lead vehicle, flipping it onto its side and blocking the road ahead. Simultaneously, the bridge behind them erupted in flames, cutting off their retreat. Ambush! The driver shouted, swerving to avoid debris from the explosion. Walker reacted instantly, pushing the FBI agent to the floor of the vehicle while scanning for threats. All elements, be advised, this is a complex ambush. Maintain positions and stand by for further instructions. Through the smoke and confusion, Walker spotted movement on the ridgeline to their right, a team of at least 4 operatives moving toward their position with tactical precision. Contact right, multiple hostiles, Walker reported, raising his rifle. Overwatch, do you have visual? Negative, Ghost. Smoke is obscuring our line of sight. Walker made a split-second decision. Driver, on my mark, accelerate through the gap on the left side of the lead vehicle. Maximum speed regardless of terrain. Sir, that's a 30-foot drop to the riverbed, which makes it the one direction they won't expect us to go. Execute on my mark. Walker turned to the FBI agent. When we hit the water, exit the vehicle immediately and move to the eastern bank. Overwatch will provide cover fire. The driver tensed, hands gripping the wheel as Walker counted down. 3, 2, 1. Execute! The SUV lurched forward, accelerating toward the narrow gap between the damaged lead vehicle and the guardrail. Bullets impacted the armored body as the hostiles opened fire. Walker returned fire through his window, providing covering suppression as they hurtled toward the edge. The vehicle crashed through the weakened guardrail, momentarily airborne before plunging toward the river below. The impact with the water was jarring, the armored SUV sinking rapidly as water began seeping through damaged seams. Walker kicked his door open against the pressure of the water, pulled the FBI agent out, and guided him toward the eastern shore. Above them, the sound of gunfire indicated that Reynolds' snipers had engaged the hostile force, providing the covering fire they needed. As they reached the riverbank, soaked and battered but alive, Walker accessed the situation with cold precision. The ambush had been expertly planned and executed, not just to eliminate Baranov, but specifically to separate Walker from his support team. Iron, do you copy? He spoke into his water-resistant radio. Static answered him. Overwatch 1, do you copy? More static than a broken transmission. Ghost, jamming, can't maintain, position compromised. Walker turned to the FBI agent. We've got electronic warfare in play. They're jamming our communications. Move into those trees and stay low. Help will come once our people realize what's happened. What about you? The agent asked, clearly recognizing that Walker had something else in mind. Walker checked his rifle, ensuring it had survived the river crossing. I'm going hunting. From his elevated position in the abandoned hunting cabin, Alexander Volkov observed the chaos below with cold satisfaction. Everything had proceeded according to plan. The convoy ambushed, communications disrupted, and most importantly, John Walker separated from his support elements. At 65, Volkov remained as precise and lethal as he had been during his KGB days. His once dark hair had turned silver, and deep lines marked a face that had witnessed the fall of empires and the bloody birth of new ones. But his hands remained steady, his mind razor-sharp, and his purpose unwavering. He spoke quietly into his encrypted radio. Team 2, report status. American Overwatch positions neutralized, came the professional response. 2 casualties on our side. And Walker? Last seen moving east along the riverbank. Team 3 is in pursuit. Volkov smiled slightly. Walker was doing exactly what he expected, moving away from the ambush site, likely trying to circle back to higher ground where he could establish a defensive position. Predictable, even after all these years. He adjusted his position slightly, checking the firing solution on his custom SVD sniper rifle. The weapon was an old friend, modified extensively over decades of use. Unlike the Americans with their obsession for new technology, Volkov believed in perfecting what already worked. His radio crackled again. "Sir, Colonel Peterson is requesting update." Volkov's expression hardened at the mention of the American traitor. Peterson had been useful, first in Berlin in 1989 and now in the current operation. But usefulness had limits, and Peterson's were rapidly approaching. "Tell the colonel his services are no longer required," Volkov replied coldly. "Implement Protocol Echo." "Understood, sir." In the distance, Volkov could see his men spreading out through the forest, hunting for Walker with the methodical efficiency he had drilled into them. Former Spetsnaz operators, now working as private contractors for whoever paid their considerable fees. Loyal not to a country or cause, but to excellence in their craft and the money it brought them. Volkov adjusted his scope, scanning the terrain where Walker would most likely emerge. The American had been good, one of the best Volkov had ever encountered. In another life, they might have respected each other as professionals. But Berlin had changed everything. Berlin had made it personal. Through his scope, Volkov caught a flicker of movement, too deliberate to be wildlife, too cautious to be one of his own men. He focused, zooming in on a section of dense undergrowth approximately 800 meters from his position. There, a shadow moving against shadows. Walker. Volkov's finger hovered near the trigger, but he didn't fire. Not yet. The shot was possible, but not guaranteed. And with Walker, anything less than certainty was unacceptable. Besides, there was still the matter of protocol. The game had rules, even after all these years. "All teams," Volkov spoke into his radio. "Target is moving toward Sector 5. Maintain distance but continue pursuit. I want him driven to the ridge clearing." The chase would continue a while longer. Walker deserved that much at least, the dignity of a proper hunt before the end. Walker moved through the forest with the quiet efficiency that had earned him his nickname decades earlier. His clothes were still damp from the river, but the discomfort registered only as a peripheral awareness. Data to be managed, not distraction to be indulged. He had identified Volkov's most likely position based on terrain analysis and the direction of the ambush team's approach. The abandoned cabin on the western ridge offered perfect sightlines across the valley, while providing cover and multiple escape routes, exactly the kind of position Volkov preferred. The pursuit team behind him was good, professional operators maintaining proper spacing and communication discipline. Walker had caught glimpses of them through the trees, noting their Russian-style movement patterns and equipment. They weren't trying to close with him, which confirmed his assessment. They were herding him, driving him toward a predetermined kill zone where Volkov would be waiting. Standard Spetsnaz hunting technique. Walker allowed them to think they were succeeding, moving in the direction they anticipated while gradually working his way toward a flanking position that would bring him within striking distance of the cabin. It was a dangerous game. If Volkov realized what he was doing, Walker would be exposed with minimal cover. As he moved, his mind remained focused on the terrain, the wind direction, the quality of light filtering through the trees, all factors that would affect visibility and shooting conditions. He noted the time of day and calculated how shadows would shift over the next hour, providing additional concealment as he approached his target. A twig snapped approximately 50 meters to his left, one of the pursuers moving parallel to his position. Walker froze, becoming part of the forest, his breathing shallow and controlled. The pursuer passed without detecting him, continuing on the expected intercept course. Walker waited 2 full minutes after the man passed before moving again, now adjusting his route to take advantage of the gap in the pursuit line. His progress was deliberate but steady, each step placed with the care developed through countless operations behind enemy lines. After 30 minutes of careful movement, he reached a position with partial visibility of the cabin. Through a screen of pine branches, he could see the structure approximately 400 meters away, situated on a rocky outcropping that commanded views of the surrounding valley. Walker raised his rifle scope, scanning methodically for signs of occupation. The cabin's windows were partially obscured, but he detected the subtle reflection of glass that suggested optical equipment, likely a spotter scope or rifle sight. Checking his ammunition, Walker confirmed he had 8 rounds remaining, enough if used judiciously. He keyed his radio one final time, hoping that distance from the jamming source might allow a transmission. "Iron, this is Ghost. If you can hear me, I have eyes on the primary target. Cabin on Western Ridge. Am proceeding to engage. Be advised, multiple hostiles in the area." Only static answered him, but Walker hadn't expected more. He was on his own, as he had been many times before during his long career. The pursuit team would be closing in, having realized by now that he had slipped their cordon. Walker estimated he had perhaps 10 minutes before they converged on his position. Not enough time to set up a proper sniper hide, but enough for what he had in mind. He began moving again, circling to approach the cabin from the least obvious direction, a steep, rocky slope that most operators would consider too exposed for a safe approach. But Walker had learned long ago that sometimes the most dangerous route was the least expected, and therefore the safest. As he climbed, staying low against the rocks, a familiar calm settled over him, the absolute focus that had carried him through the most dangerous missions of his career. Not adrenaline, not fear, not even determination. Simply clarity of purpose. Volkov was waiting. Walker was coming. One way or another, Berlin would finally be settled. In the command center hastily established near the ambush site, Harrison and Mitchell worked frantically to re-establish communication with Walker and coordinate the response teams converging on the area. "FBI tactical teams are 8 minutes out," Mitchell reported, hanging up a satellite phone. "Local law enforcement has established a perimeter 2 miles from the ambush site." Harrison nodded, his weathered face tense with concentration as he studied the topographical map spread across their makeshift operations table. "Any contact from Reynolds's snipers?" "One made it to the extraction point with minor injuries. Reports the other was killed in the initial attack. Communications equipment was specifically targeted." Harrison's expression darkened. Another casualty in a war most Americans didn't know was still being fought. "And Walker?" Mitchell shook her head. "Nothing since the ambush. Last visual contact was him moving east from the river." "He's not moving east," Harrison said with absolute certainty. "That's what he wants Volkov's men to think. He's circling back to find a firing position." He studied the map intently, thinking like the man he had trained decades earlier. "If I were Ghost, where would I go?" His finger traced potential routes across the contour lines, considering approach angles, cover, wind direction, all the factors a sniper of Walker's caliber would automatically process. "Here," he said finally, tapping a location on the western ridge. "This abandoned hunting cabin commands the entire valley. Perfect sniper position with multiple escape routes. That's where Volkov will be, which means that's where Walker is heading." Mitchell immediately began coordinating their assets, redirecting FBI teams toward the new location. "We're still at least 15 minutes from being able to provide any support." Harrison straightened, his decision made. "Too long. I'm going after him." "Sir, with respect, you're 70 years old. This is a job for tactical teams." Harrison fixed her with a level gaze honed through decades of command decisions. I've known John Walker for 40 years. I know how he thinks, how he moves, how he fights. And I know Volkov too. Studied his file until I could recite it in my sleep after Berlin. He checked the sidearm holstered at his waist. Direct the FBI teams to approach from the south and east. I'll take the northern route. Before Mitchell could protest further, Harrison's secure phone rang. The screen showed Reynolds' name. Harrison, he answered tersely. Reynolds' voice came through clearly. Sir, we've intercepted communications between Volkov's team and Colonel Peterson. Peterson has been compromised. He's at Norfolk Naval Station right now. Harrison's blood ran cold. Where exactly? Security cameras show him entering the secure wing where the real Baranov is being held. Son of a bitch, Harrison hissed. He knows our play. The ambush was just to separate our forces. Mitchell, hearing this, was already on her second phone, alerting Norfolk security. This was never about Walker. Baranov was the real target all along. Harrison's mind raced through the implications. No, it's both. Volkov's executing parallel operations. Peterson goes after Baranov while Volkov eliminates Walker. Two objectives, one operation. He turned to Mitchell. Coordinate with Norfolk. Get Baranov secured and Peterson detained. I'm still going after Walker. As Harrison moved toward the door, Reynolds' voice came through the phone again. Sir, there's one more thing. We've been analyzing Volkov's communication patterns. He's not just after Walker for Berlin. There's something else. Harrison paused. What? Volkov keeps referencing the Afghanistan debt. Does that mean anything to you? Harrison's expression changed as old memories surfaced. Afghanistan, 1985. Walker was deployed as part of a CIA operation, supporting Mujahideen fighters against Soviet forces. He eliminated a high-value Soviet advisor at extreme range, one of his most famous shots. Could that advisor have been connected to Volkov? Harrison closed his eyes briefly as the pieces fell into place. The advisor's name was Mikhail Volkov, Alexander's younger brother. He ended the call, turning to Mitchell. This isn't just about Berlin or checkmate. This is about family. Without another word, Harrison departed, moving with the purposeful efficiency of a man who had spent his life preparing for moments when everything hung in the balance. The years seemed to fall away as muscle memory and training took over, carrying him toward what he knew would be a final confrontation between two of the deadliest operatives the Cold War had ever produced. The cabin door opened silently under Walker's careful pressure. He entered in a low crouch, rifle at the ready, scanning for threats in the dim interior. The main room was empty, dust covering simple furniture that hadn't been used in years. But there were fresh footprints in the dust, leading toward a narrow staircase at the rear of the cabin. Walker moved silently across the room, avoiding the obvious creaking boards, maintaining complete situational awareness. His instincts screamed warning. This was too easy. Volkov would never leave his back so exposed. Reaching the bottom of the stairs, Walker paused, listening intently. Nothing but the natural sounds of the building settling and the faint whisper of wind outside. He began ascending slowly, testing each step before committing his weight, keeping his rifle trained upward. As he neared the top, a voice spoke from above, a voice Walker hadn't heard in 30 years, yet recognized instantly. You've aged well, Ghost. Walker froze, calculating options, assessing the situation. Volkov knew he was there but hadn't fired. That meant he wanted to talk, at least briefly. You always did prefer to work from elevated position, Surgeon. Walker replied evenly, using Volkov's old code name. A soft chuckle floated down the stairs. Professional habit. Please join me. I've been waiting a long time for this conversation. Walker continued his ascent, hyper-aware that he was potentially walking into a trap. As he reached the top step, he finally saw his adversary, Alexander Volkov sat calmly beside a window, his sniper rifle resting on a bipod, with its barrel pointed outside rather than at Walker. He was older than in Walker's memories, his once dark hair now silver, his face lined with age, but his eyes remained the same, cold, calculating, utterly without remorse. You could have taken the shot, Walker observed, maintaining a combat-ready stance despite Volkov's apparently relaxed posture. And missed this moment? 30 years I've waited to look you in the eyes. Walker. Volkov gestured toward the valley visible through the window. Your friends are coming. Helicopters, FBI tactical teams, local police. We have perhaps 5 minutes before our privacy is interrupted. Walker remained silent, assessing. Volkov seemed unnaturally calm, almost pleased with the situation. Something was wrong. You're wondering why I seem so unconcerned, Volkov continued, reading Walker's thoughts with disturbing accuracy. Perhaps you believe I have explosives rigged or snipers positioned to eliminate us both. Nothing so dramatic, I'm afraid. Then what's your play, Volkov? You've gone to extraordinary lengths to arrange this meeting. Volkov smiled thinly. Do you remember Afghanistan, 1985? A Soviet military advisor to the Afghan army, eliminated at 1,700 meters as he inspected frontline positions. One of your most celebrated shots, I believe. Walker's expression remained neutral, but his mind raced through implications. Mikhail Volkov, your brother. My younger brother, Volkov confirmed, a flicker of genuine emotion crossing his features. Brilliant, idealistic, devoted to the Soviet cause in ways I never was. He was supposed to be safe, advising from behind the lines. Until you put a bullet through his heart. It was war, Walker said simply. We were on opposite sides. Yes, we were. And in Berlin, 4 years later, I returned the favor by killing your spotter. James Davis, wasn't it? I could have killed you too, but that would have been insufficient. Volkov's cold eyes studied Walker. I wanted you to live with it, as I had lived with my brother's death, to know someone had taken something irreplaceable from you. Walker maintained his tactical focus, even as old grief threatened to surface. And now? Peterson is moving against Baranov as we speak. Your operation is blown. Volkov waved dismissively. Peterson was always expendable, a useful idiot motivated by money and resentment of his superiors. Baranov is a secondary objective. Valuable, certainly, but not essential. Then what is the essential objective? Closure, Ghost. For both of us. Volkov stood slowly, keeping his hands visible. For 30 years, we've been locked in our private war while the world moved on. The Soviet Union fell, America declared victory, new enemies emerged. But you and I remained frozen in 1989, unable to move forward because our business was unfinished. Walker watched him carefully, aware that even at 65, Volkov remained extremely dangerous. And how do you propose to finish it? In response, Volkov reached into his pocket and removed a small object, a chess piece, a knight. He placed it on the windowsill between them. One shot, one kill, the professional courtesy we never extended to each other during our careers. Volkov nodded toward the window. Your people will be here soon. We don't have much time to conclude our business. Walker understood with perfect clarity. Volkov was proposing a final confrontation. Sniper against sniper, each with one chance to eliminate the other. It was madness, yet somehow fitting for two men whose lives had been defined by their ability to deliver death from a distance. And if I refuse, Volkov smiled thinly, then the explosives I've placed around this cabin will ensure neither of us leaves. A less elegant conclusion, but still an ending. Walker assessed his options quickly. He could attempt to take Volkov now, at close range, but the Russian's posture suggested he was prepared for such a move. The explosives threat might be a bluff, But Walker's instincts told him otherwise. How would this work? Walker asked finally. Simple. We each take a position 500 meters apart. When the sun reaches the ridgeline, we fire. One shot each. Skill against skill, as it should have been from the beginning. It was insanity. A duel from another century, adapted for modern assassins. Yet Walker found himself considering it, not because of Volkov's threat, but because of the weight he'd carried since Berlin. The unfinished business, the debt owed to Jimmy Davis, the knowledge that Volkov remained free to kill again. And Baranov, Peterson is already being intercepted if your FBI is even minimally competent. Volkov shrugged. As I said, he was always a means to an end, the end being this moment between professionals. A distant sound of helicopter rotors broke the silence. Their window was closing. Walker made his decision. 500 meters, one shot each. Volkov nodded, something like satisfaction in his expression. The eastern clearing for you. I'll take the western ridge. We'll have clear sight lines to each other with minimal cover. I'll need confirmation the explosives are disarmed. Of course. Volkov produced a small remote and pressed a sequence of buttons. Deactivated, you can verify with your EOD teams when they arrive. By then, our business will be concluded. Walker maintained eye contact with his longtime adversary, searching for deception but finding only cold certainty. Two old warriors, products of a conflict most of the world had moved beyond, preparing for one final confrontation. For what it's worth, Volkov said quietly, your reputation was deserved. You were the best American I ever encountered. Save it for after, Walker replied, already moving toward the stairs. If you're still breathing? Harrison arrived at the cabin just as Walker was exiting through the rear door. His old friend's expression told him everything he needed to know. Ghost. What the hell is happening? We've got teams converging from all directions. Walker continued moving purposefully toward the tree line. Volkov's inside. He's proposed a final solution to our unfinished business. Harrison fell into step beside him, immediately understanding the implications. A duel? Jesus, John, this isn't the Cold War anymore. We have tactical teams, drones, legal jurisdictions. This was never about jurisdictions, Walker replied, checking his rifle methodically. It's about Berlin, Afghanistan, Jimmy Davis, Mikhail Volkov, debts that can't be paid any other way. This is suicide. Volkov is setting you up. Walker paused, turning to face his oldest friend. Maybe, but he's also offering the one thing no court or prison ever could, closure, for both of us. He checked his watch. Peterson? Being intercepted at Norfolk. Baranov is secure. Harrison grabbed Walker's arm. Listen to me. You don't have to do this. We have him surrounded. He's finally cornered after all these years. Walker gently but firmly removed Harrison's hand, which is exactly why this is happening now. Volkov knows his operational days are over. This is his last move, the final play of a master. And you're giving him exactly what he wants. No. Walker's eyes were clear, focused. I'm finishing what I started in Berlin, one way or another. Harrison recognized the resolve in his friend's expression, the same determination he'd seen before countless high-risk operations throughout their careers. Walker had made his decision. What's the play? Harrison asked finally, shifting from friend to fellow operator. 500 meters, eastern clearing to western ridge. One shot each when the sun hits the ridgeline. Walker nodded toward the cabin. He claims the explosives are disarmed. Get EOD to verify that, then clear the area. No interference. Reynolds' remaining sniper could take him out right now. Clean shot, no risk to you. Walker shook his head. That's not how this ends, Frank. You know that as well as I do. Harrison studied his friend's face, seeing not just the operator he'd trained and commanded, but the man beneath, a warrior seeking the conclusion to a battle that had defined half his life. "All right," he said finally, "but I'm having teams ready to move the instant after shots are fired. Whatever happens, Volkov doesn't leave that ridge except in custody or a body bag." Walker nodded once, then continued toward his designated position. Harrison watched him go, the straight back and purposeful stride so familiar after decades of friendship, wondering if this would be the last time he saw John Walker alive. The eastern clearing opened before Walker like a natural shooting range, 500 meters of open ground, sloping gently upward to the western ridge where Volkov would be waiting. Perfect visibility, minimal wind interference, ideal shooting conditions for two masters of the craft. Walker established his position methodically, preparing his rifle with the same careful attention he'd given it for 40 years of service. Each action was measured, precise, the ritual of a man who had turned killing into an art form, however reluctantly. Through his scope, he could see Volkov on the opposite ridge, similarly preparing. The Russian raised a hand in acknowledgement when he noticed Walker's arrival, a strangely civilized gesture considering what was about to happen. Walker checked his watch. 3 minutes until the sun reached the agreed position. 3 minutes of life guaranteed, with everything after that dependent on whose skills had better withstood the passage of time. He used the moments to center himself, controlling his breathing, finding that perfect state of calm focus that had served him throughout his career. Not emotionless, but emotions channeled into absolute clarity of purpose. His radio crackled to life, Harrison, calling from the command position established near the cabin. "Ghost, EOD confirms explosives are disarmed. Area is secured. FBI has Peterson in custody at Norfolk. Baranov is safe." "Copy that," Walker replied quietly. "Reynolds is on the secure line. He wants to speak with you." Walker hesitated, then keyed his radio. "Put him through." Reynolds' voice came clearly across the channel. "Sir, I just wanted to say, the things you taught us these past few days, they weren't just about shooting." Walker smiled slightly. "No, they weren't. Whatever happens up there, we'll remember the fundamentals, the discipline, the responsibility that comes with the skill." Reynolds paused. "It's been an honor, Ghost." "Likewise, Captain. Take care of your team." Walker signed off, returning his full attention to the task at hand. The sun was approaching the designated position, its light turning golden as it prepared to touch the ridgeline. Through his scope, he could see Volkov making final adjustments to his firing position. Two old warriors, products of a conflict most of the world had forgotten, preparing for one final exchange. Walker settled into his shooting rhythm, controlling his breathing, finding the space between heartbeats where perfect stillness existed. He had made this shot thousands of times throughout his career. 500 meters was well within his effective range, even at 62. The question wasn't whether he could make the shot, but whether he should. Volkov had killed Jimmy Davis, had orchestrated attacks that killed other Americans, had betrayed his oath as surely as Walker had kept his. Yet something about this final confrontation felt right. Two professionals concluding their business directly, without collateral damage or political complication, the purest distillation of the shadow war they had waged across decades. The sun touched the ridgeline, golden light spilling across the valley. Walker exhaled softly, his finger taking up the trigger slack with practiced precision. Through his scope, he saw Volkov doing the same, their actions mirrored across 500 meters of open ground. In that moment, Walker made his decision, not from fear or hesitation, but from the wisdom acquired through a lifetime of service. He adjusted his aim slightly, maintaining the appearance of a killing shot while changing the impact point. The bullet would miss Volkov's center mass by centimeters, close enough to demonstrate his skill, not close enough to kill. Because John Walker had spent his life taking lives in service to his country. But he would end his career by choosing not to take one more. The rifles fired simultaneously, their reports echoing across the valley like final punctuation to a 30-year conversation. Walker felt the impact as Volkov's bullet struck his upper shoulder, a precision shot that would wound but not kill. Through his scope, he saw his own round impact just beside Volkov's neck, tearing through the collar of his jacket without touching flesh. They had both made the same choice. As FBI teams converged on Volkov's position, Walker lowered his rifle, a strange sense of peace settling over him. The debt was paid. The past was finally laid to rest. Harrison reached him first, medical kit already open. "You're hit." "It's nothing," Walker replied, watching as agents secured Volkov on the opposite ridge. "He could have killed me. Chose not to." "And you did the same," Harrison observed, applying pressure to the wound. "Why?" Walker considered the question as medical personnel arrived, taking over from Harrison. "Because killing him wouldn't have brought Jimmy back, wouldn't have changed Berlin or Afghanistan. Some cycles need to be broken, not completed." As they prepared to transport him to a medical facility, Walker caught a glimpse of Volkov being led to a waiting FBI vehicle. Their eyes met across the distance, not as enemies any longer, but as two professionals who had made the same choice for different reasons, finally finding common ground in choosing life over death. 3 months later, Walker stood before a new class of sniper candidates at Quantico. His shoulder had healed well, leaving yet another scar to join the collection accumulated across a lifetime of service. Captain Reynolds sat nearby in his wheelchair, his legs still in a brace but healing steadily. The young faces before them watched with rapt attention as Walker picked up a rifle. Not his old M40A1, but one of the modern systems with all the latest technology. "This," Walker said, holding up the weapon, "is a tool, a remarkable one, representing decades of engineering and innovation. It will help you perform your duty with unprecedented precision and effectiveness." He set the rifle down, then reached into a case beside him, withdrawing his weathered green notebook. "And this contains something no technology can replace: experience. The accumulated knowledge of generations of warriors who learned through trial and error, success and failure, life and death." He handed the notebook to Reynolds, who accepted it with evident emotion. "The most dangerous weapon in any conflict isn't the one with the longest range or the biggest payload," Walker continued. "It's the human mind that directs it, the judgment, discipline, and wisdom that determines when to fire, and equally important, when not to." Reynolds opened the notebook, revealing page after page of handwritten notes. Ballistic tables, wind calculations, observations about terrain and light conditions, all recorded in Walker's precise handwriting across decades of service. "Captain Reynolds will be your lead instructor," Walker announced to the class. "He carries not just his own knowledge, but the legacy of those who came before. Listen well, because what you learn here will determine not just your effectiveness as operators, but your legacy as human beings entrusted with extraordinary responsibility." As the class dispersed for their first practical exercise, Reynolds wheeled himself beside Walker, the notebook resting in his lap. "You know," Reynolds said quietly, "when I first met you, I thought you were a relic, outdated, replaced by technology and progress." Walker smiled slightly. "And now?" Reynolds looked down at the notebook, then back to Walker. "Now I understand that some things can't be replaced. Some lessons can only be passed from one generation to the next through direct transmission." He hesitated. "Will you stay on as an advisor?" Walker shook his head, gazing across the training grounds where he had begun his own journey so many decades earlier. "My part is done. The rest is up to you." "What about Volkov?" "Serving life in a federal supermax," Walker replied, "though I suspect his intelligence value will eventually earn him some form of reduced sentence. The game never really ends. Just the players change." Reynolds nodded thoughtfully. "And what will you do now?" Walker considered the question, feeling the weight of purpose that had driven him for so long finally lifting. Live, he said simply. Something I haven't tried much of until now. As he walked away from the training grounds, Walker felt neither triumph nor regret, only the quiet satisfaction of a professional who had completed his final mission with honor intact. Behind him, a new generation prepared to take up the mantle, carrying forward not just techniques and technologies, but the wisdom that made them worthy of the responsibility. The ghosts of Berlin, of Afghanistan, of all the shadowed battlefields of his career seemed finally at rest. John Ghost Walker had completed his service. Now it was time to discover who he might become without a rifle in his hands.